Most people who grow ginger at home never see the kind of harvest they were hoping for. And the crazy part? It's not because ginger is hard to grow. It's because nobody told them the few things that actually matter. Today, that changes. By the time this video is done, you're going to know exactly what to do before, during, and after planting ginger to get thick, heavy rhizomes and more ginger than you ever thought possible from your own garden. If this is your first time here, welcome. You're in the right place. On this channel, we don't just plant and hope for the best, we grow smarter. So before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because I share practical, results-driven tips like this regularly, the kind that actually give you bigger harvests, stronger plants, and fewer mistakes. And trust me, if you're serious about growing large, healthy ginger, you won't want to miss what's coming next. All right, let's get into it. I want to start by being real with you for a second. I have talked to so many home growers who tell me the same story. They plant ginger, they water it, they wait, and then weeks go by and nothing happens. Or worse, they dig it up months later and find tiny, sad little rhizomes that barely look like ginger at all. And they blame themselves. They think they just don't have a green thumb or that ginger is some difficult, exotic plant that only grows in perfect tropical conditions. But that's not the truth. The truth is, ginger is actually one of the most generous plants you can grow at home, when you understand what it needs. And most of the time, the difference between a disappointing harvest and an absolutely massive one comes down to just a handful of decisions that happen before the ginger even goes into the ground. So let's talk about those decisions, one by one. And I promise you, once you apply these, your whole relationship with growing ginger is going to shift completely. The very first thing we need to talk about is the ginger itself, the rhizome you're starting with. Because here's something that most beginner growers don't realize. Not all ginger is created equal, and the piece you start with will literally determine the ceiling of your entire harvest. You could do everything else perfectly and still end up with a weak crop if you started with the wrong rhizome. So what does the right rhizome look like? You want something plump, firm, heavy in your hand. When you look at it, you should be able to see little nodules or bumps on the surface. Those are called growth buds or eyes, and those are the spots where your new shoots are going to emerge. The more healthy buds on your rhizome, the more shoots you'll get. And more shoots means more plant, which eventually means more ginger. Now, if you're getting your ginger from the grocery store, which is totally fine, please do yourself a favor and go for organic. This is so important and so many people skip it. Conventional ginger that you find in most supermarkets has often been treated with a sprout inhibitor. That's a chemical designed to keep the ginger from budding on the shelf so it stays pretty for longer. But when you take that treated ginger home and plant it, that same chemical works against you. Your ginger just sits there in the soil doing absolutely nothing, and you're left wondering what went wrong. Organic ginger hasn't been treated with those chemicals, so the rhizomes are ready and eager to wake up when you plant them. The growth buds are alive and responsive. That's exactly what you want. Now, once you've chosen your rhizome, here's a step that I consider non-negotiable, and it's one that a surprising number of people skip because it sounds too simple. Soak your ginger rhizomes in water overnight before planting. That's it. Just let them sit in a bowl of room temperature water for 8 to 12 hours. What this does is rehydrate the rhizome and essentially signal to those growth buds that it's time to wake up. You're telling the plant, hey, conditions are good, it's time to grow. And here's a little upgrade to that soaking process that has made a real difference for me. Add a small amount of hydrogen peroxide to the water, about 1 tablespoon for every cup of water. Hydrogen peroxide is a powerful natural sanitizer, and what it does is kill off any fungal spores or bacteria that might be sitting on the surface of your rhizome. You can't always see those pathogens, but they're often there, and if they get into your soil, they can cause rot before your ginger ever gets a chance to sprout. The hydrogen peroxide soaking step is like giving your ginger a clean slate before it goes into the ground. After the soak, don't rush to plant right away. Take your rhizomes out of the water and let them air dry on a clean surface for 1 to 2 days. What you're waiting for is the cut ends, the places where you may have broken or cut pieces apart, to form a dry, slightly hardened layer called a callus. This callus is a natural barrier against rot. It seals that open wound, so to speak, and protects the rhizome once it's surrounded by moist soil. Skipping this step and planting freshly cut wet rhizomes is one of the fastest ways to lose your crop to rot, so be patient and let that callus form. Now let's talk about where your ginger is going to live, the container and the soil, because even a perfectly prepared rhizome will struggle if it's planted in the wrong environment. Ginger has a specific way it likes to grow. It spreads outward, not downward. The roots and rhizomes travel horizontally under the soil surface, expanding in all directions. So what that means for you is that you need a container that gives them room to spread. A pot that is wide is far more important than a pot that is deep. I recommend going with something at least 12 to 14 inches across and around 8 to 10 inches deep. If you have space for something larger, even better. The more horizontal space your ginger has, the more it can spread, and the larger and more abundant your rhizomes will grow. Don't try to squeeze ginger into a small, narrow pot and then wonder why you got a tiny harvest. Give it space, and it will reward you. Drainage is absolutely critical. Ginger loves moisture, but it cannot tolerate sitting in waterlogged soil. If your container doesn't have drainage holes, or if the holes are blocked or too small, water will pool at the bottom of the pot, the roots will suffocate, and your rhizomes will rot. Make sure your container has good, open drainage holes and that water flows freely out of them when you water. Now let's talk about the soil mix, because this is where you can really give your ginger an unfair advantage. Commercial potting soil on its own is okay, but it's not ideal. Ginger wants something that is rich in nutrients, holds moisture reasonably well, but drains fast enough that the roots never sit wet for too long. It's a balance, and the way you hit that balance is by building a custom mix. The combination I've found works best is 2 parts good quality potting soil, 1 part compost, and 1 part perlite. The potting soil gives you your base structure. The compost brings in nutrients and beneficial microbial activity that will feed your ginger as it grows, and the perlite, those little white, lightweight particles, opens up the mix and creates air pockets so that drainage stays excellent even when you're watering regularly. Before you fill your container, there's one more ingredient I want you to add to this mix: bone meal. Just a spoonful per pot worked into the soil. Bone meal is rich in phosphorus, and phosphorus is the mineral most responsible for root and rhizome development. It encourages your ginger to put energy into building big, thick, heavy rhizomes underground, which is exactly what you want. If you can also find some wood ash, a light dusting of that adds potassium, which supports the overall health and vigor of the plant. Healthy plants above ground means productive plants below ground. All right, now we're ready to actually get the ginger in the ground. And this is the part where I see even experienced gardeners make a mistake that costs them their harvest. The mistake is planting too deep. Ginger is a shallow plant. The rhizomes grow right near the surface. If you bury them deep, they'll struggle to push through, and in many cases, the moisture in the deep soil will cause them to rot before they ever sprout. You want to plant your rhizomes just 1 to 2 inches below the surface. That's it, barely covered with soil. And make sure the growth buds, those little pointed nubs we talked about earlier, are facing upward. They need to be pointing toward the surface so the shoots can find their way out. If you're planting more than one rhizome in the same container, space them 6 to 8 inches apart. This gives each plant enough room to develop its own root system without competing too aggressively with its neighbors. Once the rhizomes are in place, cover them gently with your soil mix, remember just 1 to 2 inches, and press the surface down softly. Then add a thin layer of mulch right on top of the soil. Half an inch of straw, dried leaves, or even wood chips works perfectly. This mulch layer does a few important things. It keeps the soil moisture from evaporating too quickly between waterings, it regulates the soil temperature, and it protects those shallow rhizomes as you develop. In cooler weather, that temperature regulation alone can be the difference between your ginger sprouting on time or sitting dormant for weeks. Now, let's get into watering, because this is probably the topic I get the most questions about when it comes to ginger, and I understand why. It feels like a tricky balance. Ginger needs consistent moisture, but too much water will kill it. So how do you find that sweet spot? Think of it like this. You want your soil to feel like a wrung-out sponge. Damp throughout, but not dripping wet, and definitely not bone dry. That's the target. On a practical level, for most climates, that means watering every 2 to 3 days. But here's the key. Don't water on a fixed schedule without checking. Before you water, stick your finger about 1 inch into the soil. If it feels dry at that depth, water. If it still feels damp, give it another day and check again. This simple habit will save your ginger plants more times than you can count. One technique that I genuinely love for ginger is bottom watering. Instead of pouring water onto the top of the soil, place your pot in a tray or basin of water and let it soak for about 20 to 30 minutes. The soil will pull the water up from below through capillary action. This does two things that are really valuable. First, it keeps the surface of the soil drier, which reduces the risk of surface mold and fungal growth. Second, it trains the roots to grow downward toward the moisture, which results in a stronger, deeper root system overall. Try this method, and I think you'll notice a real difference in how your ginger plants develop. Don't forget that ginger is a tropical plant at heart, and tropical plants love humidity. If you're growing your ginger indoors or in a particularly dry climate, the air around the plant can work against you. Give your plants a light misting every few days, or place a shallow tray of water near the pot so as the water evaporates, it creates a more humid microenvironment around your ginger. These little details add up in a big way. Let's talk about light now, because this is another area where people often get it wrong in both directions. Ginger does not want full, harsh, direct sunlight, especially not midday sun that beats down with full intensity. That kind of exposure will scorch the leaves and stress the plant. But ginger also doesn't want deep shade, because without enough light, photosynthesis slows down. The plant doesn't generate enough energy, and growth grinds to a halt. What ginger loves is bright, indirect light, a spot where it gets the morning sun, which is gentle and warm, and then filtered or dappled light for the rest of the day is absolutely ideal. Under a tree canopy, near an east-facing window, or in a spot that gets some afternoon shade, these are all great environments for ginger. Watch your plants. If the leaves look pale, washed out, or the edges are crisping up, it's getting too much direct sun. Move it to a slightly shadier spot. If the plant looks leggy, the stems are reaching and stretching, or growth just seems very slow and weak, it probably needs more light. Here's something I want to take a moment to talk about because it doesn't get mentioned enough: feeding your ginger while it grows. A lot of people plant ginger in some soil, water it, and that's the extent of the care they give it. But ginger is a hungry plant, especially when it's actively growing and trying to produce those large, dense rhizomes underground. Every 2 to 3 weeks during the growing season, give your ginger a liquid feed. Compost tea is my personal favorite because it's natural, gentle, and packed with a broad spectrum of nutrients and beneficial microbes. If you don't have compost tea available, a balanced liquid fertilizer works well too. Just avoid anything too high in nitrogen. Nitrogen promotes lush leafy growth, but what you want is root and rhizome development, and for that, you need phosphorus and potassium more than nitrogen. Keep your fertilizer balanced, or leaning slightly toward root development formulas. As the season moves on, and you start to see the leaves beginning to yellow and the plant slowing down, that's your signal that the ginger is finishing its growth cycle. At this point, back off on the watering and let the soil dry out more between sessions. The plant is redirecting all its energy into the rhizomes now, finishing off those big fat roots that you're going to harvest. Let it do its thing. Now I want to address something practical, the problems that will inevitably come up, and how to deal with them quickly, because catching these things early is the difference between saving your crop and losing it. If your ginger isn't sprouting after 3 to 4 weeks, the first thing to check is soil temperature. This is something so many growers overlook. Ginger needs warmth to germinate. The soil temperature needs to be at least 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're growing in a cool climate, or in early spring when the nights are still cold, your soil might simply be too cold for. The solution is a seedling heat mat placed under the pot. It maintains a consistent warm soil temperature and can completely transform your germination results. If temperature isn't the issue, go back and check whether your ginger was treated with a growth inhibitor, in which case the best thing to do is start fresh with organic ginger. If you're seeing yellow leaves, the most common causes are overwatering, poor drainage, or a nutrient deficiency. Check your drainage first. Make sure water is flowing out of the bottom of your pot freely. Then look at your watering frequency. If the soil is staying wet for days after watering, you need to water less or improve your soil mix. If drainage is fine and you're not overwatering, the plant may just be hungry. A good feeding with a balanced liquid fertilizer can turn yellow leaves green again relatively quickly. Rotting rhizomes are almost always caused by one of two things: planting too deep or keeping the soil too wet. If you find rot in your container, remove the affected pieces immediately, let everything dry out, and when you replant, focus on shallow planting and well-draining soil. Prevention really is everything with rot, because by the time you see it, it's often already done significant damage. If your ginger plants look generally stunted and sad, short, sparse, not putting out new leaves, they're either not getting enough light or they haven't been fed in a while. Move them to a brighter location and give them a liquid feed. You'll often see a noticeable improvement within a week or two. Now, let me talk about the harvest, because this is where all your hard work pays off, and it's genuinely exciting when you finally get to this point. Ginger is typically ready to harvest around 8 to 10 months after planting, but the timing can vary depending on your climate and growing conditions. The clearest signal that your ginger is ready is the foliage. When the leaves begin to yellow and die back on their own, that means the plant is done with its above-ground life for the season, and all the energy is stored in those rhizomes. That's when you harvest. To harvest, you can dig up the entire plant, roots, rhizomes, and all, and then separate the ginger pieces. Brush off the soil, rinse them gently, and let them dry for a day before storing. Fresh ginger keeps well in the refrigerator for several weeks, and if you want to preserve it longer, you can freeze it whole. It actually grates even easier from frozen. But here's something I absolutely love about growing ginger and want to make sure you know about. You don't have to wait for a full harvest to enjoy your ginger. Once your plant is well established and growing strong, usually around 4 to 5 months in, you can do what's called a partial harvest. Carefully brush away some of the soil at the outer edge of your container. You'll see young rhizomes there, closer to the surface. Gently snap or cut off a small section, then cover the rest back up with soil. The plant will keep growing and producing. You get fresh ginger to cook with throughout the growing season, and the main plant continues developing the big central rhizomes that you'll fully harvest at the end. It's the best of both worlds. One last thing I want to mention before we wrap up, and this is something that took me a while to figure out on my own. The secret to consistently large rhizomes year after year isn't just technique. It's starting the next season with the best possible rhizomes from this season's harvest. When you finish your harvest, set aside the biggest, firmest, most bud-covered pieces. Don't eat those ones. Store them carefully in a cool, dry place and use them as your planting stock for next season. Every year you do this, you're essentially selecting for the best genetics your ginger has to offer, and over time your harvests will just keep getting better and bigger. Ginger rewards growers who pay attention. It rewards the ones who prepare properly, who build good soil, who water with intention rather than habit. And now you have everything you need to be exactly that kind of grower. That's everything for today. And honestly, I hope this changed the way you think about growing ginger at home. If you found real value in this, the best thing you can do is subscribe to this channel right now. I put out videos regularly on growing food at home, and every single one is built to actually help you get better results. Hit the subscribe button and the bell so you never miss one. And drop a comment below and tell me, have you grown ginger before? What happened? Or if you're just starting out, tell me what question is on your mind right now. I read the comments and I genuinely want to hear from you. Until next time, get your hands in the soil, trust the process, and happy growing.